The line didn't sound emotional. It didn't sound rushed. It sounded prepared, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Grandmother, what do you mean?" My voice came out thinner than I expected, tight in my throat. I could hear machines in the background on her end, steady, clinical beeps that made everything feel colder. She didn't answer right away, just a slow inhale. "Call Cassian Duramont," she said finally. "He already has everything. Don't speak to your parents again until you do." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Then the line went dead. I sat there in my car, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. For a second, nothing made sense. Not the money, not my parents. Not the fact that my grandmother, who could barely stay awake most days, sounded more alert than anyone else in my life. Everything about that felt wrong. Because this wasn't how families handled things. This wasn't a misunderstanding or some emotional decision they'd regret later. My mom hadn't sounded guilty. My dad hadn't tried to explain. Maricel hadn't even hesitated. They acted like it was already settled, like I didn't have a say in something that had my name on it, and that part wouldn't leave me alone. I looked back down at the transaction details, multiple transfers, not one impulsive move. It had been done in pieces, over time, carefully, planned. A slow, deliberate drain I was never supposed to notice until it was too late. My grip tightened around the phone. If my grandmother already had an attorney waiting, then she hadn't just suspected this. She'd expected it, and somehow that made it worse. I pulled up my contacts again, hovering over the unfamiliar name she'd given me, Cassian Duramont. Why would my grandmother prepare for something like this, unless she knew exactly what my parents were capable of? My thumb pressed down before I could second-guess it. The phone rang once, then twice, then it clicked, and a calm voice answered. "I was wondering when you'd call, Elowen." Introduction complete, go. Chapter 1, 350 to 400 words. "I was wondering when you'd call, Elowen." I froze, the phone pressed tight against my ear. "You know who I am?" A quiet pause, papers shifting on the other end. Then, calm and measured. "Your grandmother asked me to be ready." That sentence landed heavier than anything my parents had said. I glanced back at the house in my rearview mirror. The lights were still on. Inside, they were probably still talking about centerpieces and seating charts, like nothing had just happened. "Ready for what?" I asked. "For this exact situation," Cassian replied. No hesitation, no confusion, just certainty. My chest tightened. So she knew they were going to take it? "I believe," he said carefully, "your grandmother understood certain patterns." Patterns. That word dragged up memories I hadn't thought about in years. Her sharp eyes at family dinners, the way conversations would stop when she entered the room, the tension my parents never quite hid when she questioned anything financial. "She always warned me," I muttered, more to myself than to him. "But they said she was paranoid." "And now?" he asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled up my banking app again, scrolling through the transactions with a different kind of focus. He stayed silent while I looked. "They didn't take it all at once," I said slowly. "It's split up, weeks apart." "Yes," Cassian confirmed, which suggests intent, not impulse. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a last-minute decision to help with a wedding. This was something they'd been doing quietly, while telling me everything was fine. "I need you to come in," he said. "There are documents you should see in person." "In person?" I echoed. "Can't you just tell me?" Another pause, short, deliberate. "No," he said, "because once you see them, this becomes something very different." A car door slammed somewhere behind me. I turned instinctively. My father had stepped out onto the driveway, scanning the street like he expected me to still be there. I ducked lower in my seat. "Tomorrow morning," Cassian continued. 9 a.m. sharp, don't bring anyone." "Why not?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. This time, his answer came without hesitation. Because, Elowen, your parents may not realize what they've triggered yet. My breath caught. Triggered? What? Silence. Then the line went dead. On Chapter 2, 400 to 450 words. The next morning, nothing felt normal. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the number, $82,000, like it was burned into the back of my eyelids. By the time I pulled up outside a glass-front office building downtown, when my hands were already tight on the steering wheel, Cassian Duramont's office was on the 4th floor, quiet, controlled, nothing like the chaos sitting in my chest. He stood when I walked in, tall, composed, mid-40s maybe, the kind of person who didn't waste movements. He didn't offer small talk. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. A folder was already waiting. My name was printed on the tab. I didn't touch it yet. You said my grandmother expected this. I said she prepared for it, he corrected calmly. There's a difference. That didn't help. He opened the folder himself, turning it toward me. Documents, statements, legal forms, far more than I expected. This is the structure of your settlement account, he explained, and the conditions tied to it. I leaned forward, scanning. Most of it was legal language, dense and suffocating, but one detail stood out immediately. My parents had access, I said. It says here, temporary financial guardianship. Yes, Cassian nodded. Granted after your accident, you were incapacitated. It allowed them to manage funds on your behalf. That's how they took it. Partially, he said. I looked up. What does that mean? He tapped a specific line with his pen. The guardianship had an expiration clause. It ended 18 months ago. My stomach dropped so fast it felt physical. They kept using it? They continued withdrawing funds, he said evenly, after their legal authority had expired. The room felt smaller. So what does that mean? I asked, even though I already knew the answer wouldn't be good. It means, he said, meeting my eyes directly, this is no longer just a family dispute. A long silence stretched between us. This could constitute financial misconduct, he continued, potentially fraud, depending on how it's pursued. The word fraud didn't feel real attached to my parents. They spent it on a wedding, I said weakly, like that somehow softened it. They spent funds they no longer had the right to access, he replied. The purpose doesn't change the violation. My phone buzzed suddenly on the desk. I glanced down. Maricel had just posted. A photo, her in a white dress standing in front of the venue I recognized instantly, captioned, "Best day coming soon, paid for, with my money." My jaw tightened. What happens now? Cassian didn't answer right away. Instead, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and for the first time, something shifted in his expression. He picked up immediately. Yes. I watched him listen. His posture straightened slightly, focus sharpened, then he hung up and looked directly at me. Your grandmother just activated something, he said. A beat. We need to move. Now. Go Chapter 3. 400 to 450 words. Everything accelerated after that. Forms appeared in front of me faster than I could process them. Cassian moved with quiet precision, printing, highlighting, sliding documents across the desk. Sign here and here, he said. This authorizes immediate review and enforcement. Enforcement of what? I asked, pen hovering. You'll understand shortly. That didn't help, but I signed anyway. Within the hour, emails were sent, filings submitted, notices issued. It didn't feel dramatic. No shouting, no chaos, just quiet. As irreversible movement. And then the consequences started. My phone lit up first. A text from my mom, "What did you do?" Then another, "Call me, now." I didn't respond. Minutes later, Maricel called. I let it ring. Then she texted instead. Why is the venue asking about payment disputes? Alawan, what is going on? I stared at the screen, my pulse climbing. Cassian glanced over. They've been notified. Already? I asked. Yes. Any vendor paid through those funds is now part of the inquiry. Like dominoes. I could almost picture it. Emails hitting inboxes, accounts being flagged, contracts suddenly uncertain. My dad called next. I answered this time. "What did you file?" he demanded immediately. No greeting. "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're interfering with your sister's wedding," he snapped. "Fix it!" "Fix it?" I repeated, a sharp edge creeping in. "You took $82,000 from me." "It was for the family," he shot back. "You're overreacting." Across from me, Cassian watched silently. "They're saying payments might be frozen," my dad continued. "Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Do you?" A beat of silence, then his voice dropped, colder. "You don't know what you're doing." The line went dead. For the first time, I realized something had shifted. They weren't calm anymore. Back in the office, Cassian slid another document toward me. "This is where it escalates," he said. I looked down, but before I could read it, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't family. It was a vendor email forwarded to me. Subject line, "Urgent, payment authorization under review." My chest tightened. "This is getting public," I said. "It already is," Cassian replied. I looked back at the document in front of me. Dense, legal, final. "What happens if they can't fix it?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, studying me like he was deciding how much to say. "There's one part of your grandmother's plan," he said slowly, "that wasn't meant to come into play unless absolutely necessary." My fingers curled slightly against the edge of the desk. "And now?" I asked. He turned the document fully toward me. "Now it is." I scanned the first few lines, and my entire body went still. "Wait, this means they could lose." I looked up at him. "All of it." Go conclusion, 450 to 500 words. Cassian didn't rush to answer. He let the weight of what I'd just read settle first. Then calmly, "Yes." I looked back down at the document, forcing myself to actually process it this time. It wasn't just about my settlement. It never had been. "My grandmother set this up?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "She structured her estate with layered protections," Cassian explained. "Your settlement was placed under a trust she controls, not just to safeguard the funds, but to monitor how they were handled." I swallowed. "Monitor my parents?" "In effect," he said. "Yes." The lines blurred slightly as I reread the clause. If funds were accessed unlawfully, if fiduciary responsibility was violated, it didn't just trigger repayment, it triggered a transfer of control, properties, accounts. Investments tied to Solen's estate, assets my parents had been managing for years, would be pulled out of their hands. The $82,000 wasn't the loss. It was the test, and they failed it. "They thought the account was theirs to use," I said slowly. "They assumed there would be no challenge," Cassian replied, "and no oversight." A hollow feeling settled in my chest. Not shock anymore. Recognition. They didn't panic when I confronted them, because they believed I couldn't do anything about it, that I wouldn't. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "they negotiate, or they lose far more than they took." And they knew it. Within 48 hours, everything unraveled. The wedding venue officially suspended the booking. Vendors began canceling. Florist, catering, even the dress alterations. Payments tied to the disputed funds were frozen mid-process. Maricel's social media went silent, then disappeared entirely. My parents, on the other hand, didn't stay quiet. Calls, voicemails, messages that shifted tone by the hour, first anger, then urgency, then something closer to desperation. "We can fix this," my mother said in one voicemail, her voice tight. "Just stop the process, we'll talk." But there was nothing left to pause. The filings had already gone through. Extended family started hearing about it next, quiet questions turning into open speculation. Words like legal dispute and misuse of funds spreading faster than I expected. Reputation, something my parents cared about deeply, began to crack. By the end of the week, they requested mediation, not to explain, to contain the damage. I didn't go alone. Cassian handled most of it. Structured repayment, terms, safeguards. Control of my finances was formally transferred, fully, permanently, to me. No oversight, no shared access, just mine. A few days later, I went to see my grandmother. The hospice room was dim, quiet except for the steady rhythm of machines. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were still sharp when they found mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then softly she asked, "Did they prove me right?" I held her gaze and nodded. She closed her eyes briefly, not satisfied, not relieved, just certain. When I left, my phone stayed silent for once. No calls, no messages, no noise. For the first time in weeks, it felt like something had actually ended. They took my money, but in doing that, they exposed everything they thought I'd never see, and lost far more than they ever expected.